I live in a house of rules. I should explain. I moved here 3 months ago. Flat number 27. The flat was a repossession. I never met the previous owner, and to date, know him only from the posts I received in his name. I could make up stories of him vanishing or his screams being heard in the darkness one night, but that would be an exaggerated claim, and this is not a work of fiction, nor is it written to entertain. I had just got a new job, a promotion I'd waited years for. This was meant to be the next step to a greater life, but I needed to move quickly to save on the long drive each day. When I found this place, I was overjoyed. It was well located within my price range, and apart from being extremely run down and dirty, had so much potential. It's a duplex apartment with a guest room and a spare bathroom on the ground floor, and a dressing room with several storage areas on the top floor. The purchase was a complicated one, due in part to poor record keeping and the loss of deeds and plans of the house. What should have taken a month from start to finish took about 4 all told. Because of the length of time, I took several viewings, and each time was amazed by windows and cupboards that I couldn't recall from previous visits. Rooms seemed bigger and lighter, more inviting. Even the estate agent was baffled that her property listing documents were constantly wrong. The neighbors in the block of flats are an odd lot. They don't talk. They keep to routines you can set your watch by. When I first moved in, I tried to invite them to a housewarming, so desperate was I to meet new people. None of them came. They got in at the same time every day, and they never leave their houses. I never hear them moving around at night. One of them, a nervous man from upstairs who constantly fidgets and glances around, apologized afterward. He explained his lack of attendance was simply because he wasn't allowed to. At the time, I presumed he meant by his wife, but now I'm not so certain. And he was the only one I got to know since the move. I did my best to seem friendly, and even felt like I was making headway. Then I made the mistake of asking about the previous tenant, to which he made an awkward and short response before making excuses to leave. I haven't seen or heard from him since. The rules, as I came to understand them, became apparent over time. The first was sleeping only in the bedroom. I slept once in the lounge on purpose, dozing on the sofa, until I woke up to my arms trapped between the sofa and the wall. A wall that was several feet away when I closed my eyes a few hours earlier. I was overcome with a feeling, a very familiar feeling, that I was somewhere I shouldn't be. This feeling wouldn't leave me until I hurriedly stumbled up to bed, where I only felt truly safe when I hid under the blankets like a scared child. I only fell asleep once more in the lounge after that, but it was by accident. I was woken up once again with a feeling that I should leave, that it would be unsafe to stay, and that I shouldn't be here. This time, however, a sweater I had left across the room on the radiator was tied around my neck and pulled tight enough to leave striping marks on my throat. The rule of sleeping only in my bedroom stands alongside others. Countless others. I learned that I should clean up my dishes immediately when I stepped out of the kitchen after depositing my plate and sat down on a safety pin that was jutting out of the back of the couch. I learned not to take showers for too long when the water suddenly turned scalding hot and remained so, no matter how much I desperately tried to turn it off, only to go back to the normal temperature when I tried it later. I learned that I must hoover and keep the place tidy, must not waste electricity, and that no matter what noises I hear in the night, I should never, ever go exploring. Another rule is that guests are not welcome. The last time I had a guest, it was a friend who invited themselves by, making arrangements to come and see me until I relented. How could I not? Despite my concerns that I could not air down for the weekend. I spent the entire time terrified for their safety, and pretty much drove them away with my strange behavior accordingly. But there were no events. Such things made me bold, and I began to relax. I stayed awake until late, played music at night, and did whatever I wanted, even going so far as feeling like I had triumphed, as the house remained meekly quiet. It was almost immediately after they left that I first noticed the headaches and the nausea, which became worse and worse as the gas leak continued. I only just made it out before I succumbed. I have so many things I could tell you, example upon examples. I don't know where to begin. I need you to look past your skepticism and see that this is real, that this is more than coincidence, more than just child's play haunting. I'm not being haunted. I'm being ruled. The rules are only a part of it. They're the part I play. The rest is done without me, and not only that, but around me. The walls shift. Doors open some days that won't the next. The number of windows in my bedroom increases, one by one, over consecutive nights. Then there was only one again. There's a cupboard at the top of the stairs that changes its size quite regularly. One of the most terrifying experiences of my life was when I opened it and saw it went back several meters more than I remembered. When I walked in, somehow the door shut behind me. I groped in the dark, silently reaching out for a wall I knew must be there, yet my fingers touched only air. I didn't know how long I fumbled around, but it was only as my panic rose that my shaking fingers found the wooden door. Have you ever woken up in a room with a chair sitting at the end of your bed? A chair that came from the dining room, which is down a flight of stairs and along a hallway. Have you ever walked into a room and seen a storage cupboard that wasn't there before? Have you ever observed more chairs on a staircase as you go down than there were when you went up? Have you ever entered a room looking for something, and then when you gave up and left, you realized an hour and a half had passed? I have lived all these things, and were I a better, more scientific man, I would have kept a running log of all of it. I would have found proof I need to show the world that I'm not crazy, that this is real, that it's a nightmare I'm living. 5 hours have passed since I sat down to write this. I'd hoped to prepare some lunch today and pray there are no drawing pins in my bread like last time when I realized that I hadn't cleaned up. Instead, it's getting dark. I now live a life of routine like my neighbors. I just turned off the music. No loud noises after dark is one of the rules. It's the one I hate the most because it makes me feel so alone. Lights left on in rooms that are empty, or too many in one room, are prone to fusing, or even shattering without warning. So I currently only have the glare of my computer screen, the television, and a lamp. Soon, I'll be going to bed. The doors that shut behind me as I head up to bed lock. I will wake up in a room with windows wherever they please, the door that may or may not open to cupboards that may be small or as big as they want to be. The television in the room I'm in has a satellite connection, and with it, countless channels. Right now, all are a fuzz of static, except for National Geographic, so I'm forced to listen to a documentary on carnivorous plants as I type. I try not to dwell on the exhaustion of a beetle on the screen as it tries in vain to escape from the prison that will soon digest it. The remote does not appear to work. It took my pulling the plug from the socket to turn off the TV just a moment ago, and even that I loathe to do for the fear that it might stay on no matter what. And I knew that if those images had continued when the plug had been removed, I would have screamed myself into madness. I could push the neighbors to talk more. I could rebel against the rules. I could start a fire and torch the whole building, but truly I just want to get by. I get the feeling that up until now, I've simply been coached like a dog to do what is required of me. I feel like the punishments could get a lot worse. The occasional demonstration of strength, the enforcement of the rules, the occasional mild punishment when a transgression, like one taps the nose of a dog when it's misbehaving. That is what I hope for, if I can misbehave. Stepping out of line caused me nothing but harm. It's only after fear and preservation of my human dignity that I do not explain here what happened when the house feels like it really needs to punish me. Needless to say, the scar will be with me for the rest of my life. Which brings us to here. I can't go on. I took the decision to write this with the remaining fight I still have in me, to at least ask for help. I can't do it over the phone. I can't write a letter. My only hope is to write it into a story, inconspicuously and without the details that might draw attention to the content. All I can hope is that someone might see enough to spot my cry for help, that they find a way to contact me where I can get the lifeline I need to escape. I can't ask directly. It's too risky. Besides, any form of open rebellion has been snuffed out of me with pain, suffering, and terror. I fear for my safety, for my punishment, for breaking the rules. I'm surprised that I'm being allowed to even get this far. In over 1,000 words I have written, there hasn't been a power cut or computer error that has lost everything. Perhaps there's still hope. But the truth is, I'm scared. Scared of what touches my face when I sleep the night before last, after I accidentally left a tap running, clutching firmly the bruise on my cheek that still remains. I'm scared of what left a pair of scissors in my slippers, of what power moves wooden doors and plaster walls, seemingly on a whim. Most of all, I'm scared that by writing this, I may wake up in a tiny room with no doors or windows, a room that grows smaller every time I blink. I hadn't seen Mike in a few months. He'd been buried in work, and our usual weekend nights out had all but disappeared. Then he called me on a Thursday and invited me over for drinks. I jumped at the invite, but I took note of how depressed he sounded on the phone. By the time I got there, Mike had already started drinking and was slurring his words pretty badly. A dark cloud seemed to hover over him, which got worse when he drank. I I finally asked what had been going on with him, and Mike turned even darker. Afraid, he said it had to do with work. I never really knew what Mike did for a living. I did know that he worked for the city in the tech department, and was involved in the CCTV surveillance network, but I never knew what his day-to-day was like, which he began to describe in detail. Mike explained that there were thousands of cameras scattered throughout the downtown area, the outlying neighborhoods, as well as in the suburbs of our million-plus people city. His responsibility was to categorize and archive all the incoming footage. Most of the footage went into a very general classification and was saved to a hard drive and identified with a lengthy combination of numbers and letters for categorically archiving them. They were truly meant to be forgotten about. It was a pretty expansive task, but Mike had designed and built an AI screening program that detected common patterns in footage, which selected out anomalous behaviors for later scrutiny. He said the vast majority wasn't even noteworthy. Something like 99.9% was just trash. Then, of course, there was the 0.1%. The car accidents, the assaults, the swarmings, the abductions, the murders, those went into a special archive for use in criminal investigations. And then there was the even more exclusive 0.001%. These were held in a classification archive that contained footage of captured events that were, from all accounts, unexplainable. This was called the Tartarus Archive. I looked up the word Tartarus after and discovered that it was one of the darkest, deepest prisons in Greek mythology. It was said that if you dropped an anvil from heaven, it would take 7 days for it to reach the earth. It would take another 7 days for the anvil to reach Tartarus. It was the place they had put the Titans when they had found that nowhere else could contain them. As it turned out, the name was quite fitting for the archives. Some of the footage could be simplified to strange optical anomalies in the camera, and coincidences of light, or a crackhead on a bender going through the subway system. Other footage defied logic. The others are what captured Mike's mind that evening. He'd been breaking protocol and bringing hard drives home at night. In fact, he'd been splicing the footage together, capturing and compiling repeat aberrations, and editing them into a linear sequence. Mike wanted to show me some. It wasn't in a bragging or showing off kind of way either. It felt more like the sharing of a heavy burden. I asked if showing me would get him in trouble, but he waved the idea away. I said, yeah, obviously I want to see what's going on in the city. Mike led me into his workroom. There was a monitor and a tower and a pile of externals set up. We sat down and he skimmed through some drives nervously. Then he landed on one. Mike told me this anomaly was codenamed Lincoln Spectre. He pressed play. On the large screen, black and white footage started up, showing me Lincoln Avenue, one of our less active downtown streets, at 3 a.m. The camera angle showed me the length of Lincoln Avenue as it led into the downtown core. The street appeared to be empty and quiet. From a side road, a woman emerged, walking towards the camera. As she approached the intersection, she turned over her shoulder and appeared to scream. The woman took off, spreading past the camera, which cut to a new, wide angle from another camera across the street. We watched the woman running frantically, seeming to be chased, but she was the only one on the street. There was no one else anywhere near her. The woman kept screaming as she ran, and the camera kept following, cutting between different CCTV angles. We watched as the woman was chased in the middle of an empty intersection. She fell then, cowering as if something massive was standing over her. The woman's neck stiffened, and she began to levitate off the ground suddenly. Her body looked like a rag doll as something lifted her by the throat until she was floating a dozen feet above the road, in the middle of the intersection. Then the woman's head snapped to the left, and her body fell back to the ground. The video ended and went black. I was shocked. Mike saw my expression and said, "You ain't seen nothing yet." I asked if what I had seen was real, if that was unaltered raw footage. And Mike said that all he had done was put the clips together. Hell, none of the content had been touched. He told me the accident ended up being written up as a hit and run, and the case was left figuratively open for more evidence to amass, which it never would. The department kept footage hidden, claiming it was a camera malfunction. No one outside of Mike and his boss had seen the video, and how the poor woman had actually died. I started to understand the air of sombrance Mike was carrying around. Mike started the next video. This one was codenamed Black Crab, and was much longer than the previous one. It started in the subway system, at the underground Walkley station, shortly after closing up for the night. Walkley was the last stop on the route, and the exterior was shouldered by a new housing development on one side and an untouched forest and swampland on the other. The camera was pointed down along the subway platform on the east side, and it showed its entire length with benches and garbage cans populating it. At the far end of the tunnel, there was only darkness. The lights on the platform shut off, and the station went black. The camera switched to night vision, and everything became more visible. My eyes trained on the platform, waiting for something to happen. Finally, there was movement. It was coming from the tunnel. It was difficult to identify what exactly it was at first, since the movements were strange and the footage was grainy. But it got closer to the camera, and I got a better look. It resembled a human, a man, but he was walking on his hands and feet, upside down, with his back arched and his stomach pointing to the ceiling. He had long dark hair that dragged along the ground, and he wore the tattered layers of an old jacket and torn pants. He moved like a crab, jerkily yet quickly, and despite his posture, he made his way easily up the stairs. The footage cut to a new camera in the dark hallway leading to the stairs out of the station. We watched the crab walker claw up 2 steps at a time, and then crawl over the turnstile and towards the exit. The footage cut again, now showing the exterior of the train station. The crab walker squeezed and twisted and maneuvered his body through the locked and closed entrance. It looked impossible to accomplish, but he managed it. Once outside, the crab walker eyed his surroundings before skittering off towards the woods and disappearing. The footage cut to an hour later and revealed the crab walker reappearing from the woods. He was dragging a small animal by the tail in his teeth. It looked like a cat. The crab walker squeezed back through the gate, crawled through the station, and disappeared into the tunnel again. Mike saw my expression and told me that there was more. He showed me the length of the video, which was over an hour. Mike had compiled over 20 sequences of the crab walker creeping out of the subway station and into the woods. Mike skimmed through the videos towards the end, and we watched the crab walker coming out of a sewer in the downtown alleyway. It crawled over to a pile of garbage bags and cardboard boxes. Then it jumped onto them, and some kind of vicious frenzy ensued. There was someone else in the pile of garbage. Hands and feet thrashed about as they were struggling for their life. Then the movement stopped, and the hands and feet went still. The crab walker's body moved jerkily about, but I couldn't see what was happening because of the darkness and all the garbage bags and boxes obscuring the camera view. Mike leaned over to me and whispered that the crab walker was eating a homeless man. This caused a criminal investigation as the dead body was found mutilated and festering in the open alleyway. Mike followed up on the inquiry. What he discovered was the crab walker, who authorities believed to be a man named David Fletcher. Decades ago, David had been a prominent lawyer with a family. One Christmas, there was a huge fire, and his wife and kids were killed in the blaze. It was David's fault. He had lost everything, including his mind, it seemed. Everyone has a breaking point, whether they know it or not, a place where they've been too far and then snap. David had apparently found his. Family and friends described his descent as nightmarish. David lived on the street, becoming addicted to drugs and tumbling into mental illness. The last anyone knew of him was from 10 years prior. He'd thrown himself in front of a subway at the Walkie station, and no one had heard from him since. It appeared that somehow David had survived the subway hit. His back had broken and healed oddly, causing him to move the way he did. He'd adapted to the new posture and lived in the darkness of the subway for years, finding sustenance from drain water and wild animals that he caught. That was what Mike found out, at least, but then he said that was just the answer the investigators gave at Discovery. Who knew where the truth actually lay? Mike said there was always an answer for the videos he found. Whether the answers were true or not, no one knew. But the ones that had become public all needed explanations, however absurd. Either way, David was never found and didn't reappear on the subway footage. Mike plugged in a new hard drive. He poured a fresh drink and told me this was the one that had troubled him. The file was codenamed Cloud Mirror. I wasn't honestly sure I wanted to see it, but before I could object, Mike had pressed play. All the monitors lit up with footage from different intersections downtown on the exact date and time of each other. There were 5 in total. The streets on each of the screens were empty and quiet. No cars, no people. Suddenly, at the exact time in the center of the intersection, a small glow pulsed into existence. It was some kind of orb, roughly the size of a bowling ball. The streetlights around it pulsed with energy waves as the orb grew larger. It grew to the size of a beach ball, then it flashed out. The streetlights went back to normal, and the intersection was as lifeless as it had been before. I asked Mike what had happened. He told me he had gigs of footage of the orb and had watched them repeatedly. He didn't know what they were. At first, they had just started by chance. Mike clicked on the next video, and again 5 monitors lit up with the strange intersection and time of night, but it was several weeks later. The streetlights glowed and pulsed, and an orb manifested into existence again. It grew to its beach ball size, but then it altered the surface. Something gas-like replaced it, growing outward into a couch-sized cloud of deep gray. One of the cameras was closer, so I got to see the small cloud in detail. It looked like a volcanic eruption wrapping around itself. They were large, constantly morphing blobs that curled around from the glowing center, resembling a mandelbulb fractal as a gaseous-based organism. It was fascinating to see them floating in the middle of the street, so alien to our roads and stoplights and street lamps. Then they began to move. Gliding down empty roads, the cameras cut to different angles, following the clouds on some unknown paths, zigging and zagging into new streets and through alleyways. Then they stopped. The clouds hovered in the center of the intersection. They lowered to ground level, standing straight up like a large coffin. Holding rigid to their shapes, their exteriors continued to shift and mold together like magnets made of smoke. Something on one of the monitors caught my eye. Down the street, people appeared. They'd seen the clouds and were walking towards it. The group looked drunk and fascinated by the floating entities, so much so that they approached it. As they did, the clouds became brighter. The street lamps began to pulse. The group were in some kind of a trance, staring into the morphic blob. One of the group, a guy, stared into it like a zombie, then walked right into the cloud and disappeared. None of the group tried to stop him. Instead, another one followed him in, and another, and another. All 5 members of the group disappeared into the cloud. Then they reappeared, one at a time. The first guy, and then in the order they came in. Only they weren't stumbling or boisterous or drunk now. They were walking upright, using minimal movements. They formed into a perfect 5-person circle for several seconds after quick words, then turned and all went in separate directions. Their strides and arm swings were all sped up to match. Another monitor showed a similar situation with a large group of people, lost in revelry as they marched one after another into the cloud. Each monitor showed the same thing, people entering the clouds and coming back out different. Mike stopped the video. I asked him if he'd shown this to anyone. He said he hadn't, not even to his boss, which was a problem because he had a meeting with his boss in the morning to discuss the missing footage. I asked why he didn't show the footage to his boss. This footage seemed more serious. People were being replaced by something. Mike sighed and put a new video on. The main monitor lit up and showed a new downtown street. The date was from earlier this week, and one of the clouds was floating in the intersection. A middle-aged couple was walking nearby, the husband with a slight limp on his right leg. The couple saw the clouds and were sucked in by their aura. They approached it, eyes wide and mouths open. Both husband and wife entered the cloud and disappeared. After a moment, they reappeared and the husband's limp was magically gone. Mike turned to me and said, "That was my boss and his wife." My ex-husband always used to jump scare me. It was one of the things I hated the most about him. Well, he's doing it again. The most frustrating part is that he's been dead for 5 years. First, it was just slightly off-putting. It was in the earliest days of dating him. He'd be at my apartment, and I'd excuse myself to use the bathroom. He'd be waiting in some doorway or shadow to jump out and scare the crap out of me. It was even worse at his house. He lived way out in the middle of nowhere, and I was pretty much always low-level scared out there. But then he'd leap out from around a corner, and I'd be so scared I'd pee myself. I'd be ready to break up with him then and there, every time. In retrospect, that's obviously what I should have done. But I guess we all ignore our own inner voices sometimes, don't we? Well, obviously, or there wouldn't be so many people posting on No Sleep, trying to get other people to help them with dire problems they created by doing something stupid. Yet, here we are. I don't know why I let it slide, honestly. And that was only one of the many things about him that was terrible. Nonetheless, I repeatedly told him to cut it out, and I repeatedly did nothing when he failed to cut it out. Eventually, I even married him. He had 2 kids from a previous marriage who stayed with us a lot. And when they were there were also nieces and nephews staying over. I always liked when there was a house full of kids. It made the old, drafty, falling-down farmhouse we lived in slightly less terrifying. But you could count on my ex-husband to screw up a good thing. We were in the living room with all the kids. It was late at night. The kids were all still rowdy and playing around, he and I on the couch. There was a scary movie playing, which nobody was really paying any attention to. But Eric, my ex, got a funny look on his face and said quietly to me, "Watch this." Then he put his fingers to his lips to express that I should keep quiet. I instantly knew he was probably thinking of orchestrating some huge jump scare on all these kids. Even though he had actually given me a warning at least, I just didn't want him to do it. The youngest kid was only 4. I knew it would immediately kill the good vibes. I tried to protest, but he shushed me again, then scurried off to some other part of the house, unnoticed by any of the kids. I sighed angrily. I even tried to warn the kids, but they were all hyper and not really listening. Seconds later, Eric showed up outside the screen door and revved his chainsaw. The kids lost it. One of his daughters actually blasted backwards and got airborne in her desperation to get away from the door. The 4-year-old, of course, burst into hysterical tears, and soon they were all crying. Now, some of you reading this are probably laughing and thinking that's actually pretty funny. But the thing was, it was just so damn old. He did this dumb crap all the time. Plus, the world can really be boiled down into precisely 2 types of people. People who think it's funny to scare 4-year-olds so they cry, and people who don't. So, readers, I suppose you've sorted yourselves into teams at this point. Fast forward a few years from the dumbass chainsaw incident, and Eric and I had a son of our own. The thing about our son was that he had major, and I mean major, heart problems at birth. He had to have open-heart surgery, and he had a slew of other complications. No, that's not the point of the story, but just know that the first 8 months of his life were very touch and go. Then he was finally doing better, stronger even, able to do more. He was 9 months old, sitting on my lap, facing me. We were playing and chatting with each other when Eric lunged up behind me, grabbed him, and shouted. My little son did that thing little kids do when, for 1 full second, you don't know if they're going to burst into hysterical tears or laughter. In the end, my son burst into laughter. So did Eric. I, on the other hand, was livid. Who jump scares an infant, first of all? Secondly, who the hell jump scares an infant heart patient? That was probably the rudest I've ever been to Eric about the jump scare thing. But he just kept laughing the whole thing off, like he always did. Anyway, that wasn't why I divorced him, but we were divorced by the time our son was 3. We shared custody, and it went about how you'd expect things to go with a douchebag. But life proceeded, I suppose. When our son was about 10, he went through this phase where he started getting insanely jumpy. I mean, he just seemed incredibly paranoid. If I walked close to him or made any sudden movements, he'd flinch, almost like he thought I was going to hit him. At first, it actually sort of hurt my feelings. I had never hit my son. I didn't understand why he was being so jumpy with me. Then it started to scare me, because I wondered if someone else was hitting him. Maybe he was being bullied at school. He didn't go to his father's much at all, and I didn't imagine Eric would ever hit him. But, what if? Then I remembered the jump scaring. I finally thought to ask my son about it. He immediately revealed that, yeah, his dad jump-scared him. All the time. "It's kind of annoying, Mom," he told me. Well, yeah, I thought. I couldn't believe I'd forgotten about it. I was so mad. He only spent limited time with our son. Why was Eric spending it jump-scaring him so much that it was making him nervous and anxious all the time? What kind of crap was that? The problem was that Eric was the sort of co-parent that if I asked him for help with anything, or to back me up on anything, he'd do the exact opposite, just to be spiteful. Asking nicely never worked with him. So, if it wasn't something court-ordered, I didn't even really bother asking, because I knew he would just get worse. And let's face it, no family court is going to give a crap about somebody getting scared. I was mad as hell, but there wasn't really much I could do about it. Fortunately, he took the liberty of dying, and that took care of it. I don't mean to sound callous. Obviously, our son struggled with the death of his father, but the jumpiness subsided basically instantly after he found out that his dad was dead. Now, if your child's mental health improves because you die, it's probably because you were a crappy parent. I'm just saying. Anyway, another 5 years went by. Then I wrecked my car because a cat jumped out in front of me. I sat there in shock, gripping the steering wheel of my wrecked car. As I tried to catch my breath and make sense of what had happened, I noticed something strange. The air around me had grown cold, and a chill ran down my spine. I looked around, but no one was there. I tried to shake it off and focus on getting out of the car, but then I heard it. A low, guttural laugh echoed around me, and I froze. It sounded like my ex-husband's laugh, the man who had tormented me for years, emotionally and physically. I felt a surge of anger and fear wash over me, and I knew I needed to get out of there. I managed to escape the car and run to my house, but the eerie feeling never left me. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. I would hear footsteps in the hallway, even though no one was there. Objects would move on their own, and the temperature would drop suddenly. As I walked by the window glass on the shop on a sunny day, my own reflection seemed to lunge at me, and it scared the life out of me. A drinking glass exploded on the counter. Doors slammed in the night. Books fell from the shelves, landing with a thunk and a plume of dust. As the days passed, I realized that it wasn't just any spirit haunting me. It was my ex-husband. He was using his new ghostly powers to jump scare me from beyond the grave. The realization left me terrified. If he could do all this, what else was he capable of? I tried to find help, but no one believed me. They thought I was just imagining things or suffering from post-traumatic stress. Sleep-deprived and desperate, I found myself in a police station explaining the whole thing to a frazzled cop. He glared at me tersely, and I ended up feeling like an idiot. A gunshot rang out even as I told my story. The entire precinct jumped at what ended up being a gun going off by accident. Even so, the cop didn't believe me, of course, and sent me out into the rainy night, terrified of my own shadow. I was alone, trapped in a nightmare that I couldn't escape from. Now, as I sit here in my dark and silent house, I can feel his presence all around me. I was awoken moments ago when the bedroom door cracked violently into the wall. I know that at any minute he could jump scare me again, and this time I fear it won't be a harmless prank. I'm sitting here curled in a ball, shaking as I type this. I'm just trying to get it out, trying to leave behind my story, because I know it's only a matter of time until he scares me to death. It's been a couple of months since this phenomenon occurred. I also feel like I've bottled up too many emotions, as nobody would believe me, at least until I found you guys. So, here goes the story of the incident where I met this entity. One day, I went out to the balcony to sweep, as I usually do. I finished my work and took an afternoon siesta. After I woke up, I found a bronze statue, heavily oxidized, in a puddle of blood. I guess Now was the time to give some context. I served in the armed forces, therefore I wasn't really afraid of blood, as I'd seen my fair share of blood and death. I picked up the statue to inspect it. It had a gash on its right wrist, and it was bleeding profusely. Now this freaked me out a little. I never expected any supernatural events to happen to me. I was always skeptical of my family's classic ghost stories. Yet, my years of physical and psychological training kicked in. Statue was about 12 inches tall, featured a woman wearing a robe and holding a paper fan, staring at a noose in front of her. I took the statue and put it in the sink. My analytical mind kicked in. I collected some of the blood for further analysis. I cleaned up the puddle and the trail of blood. Last thing I want is to be landed as a murderer by the Karen next door. I then took a bath and had a change of clothes. I also wondered how the statue had gotten there. Naturally, I checked the CCTV footage. What I saw shook me to my core. I got goosebumps and sweaty hands just looking at the footage. A crow, jet black in color, with red glowing eyes, swooped in from seemingly nowhere, dropped the statue, and flew away. It easily seemed to be able to carry the moderately heavy thing. Its movements were smooth, like a knife through butter. Its eyes, though, those eyes were glowing red. They sent shivers down my spine. They seemed to dissect me and draw me into an inescapable void. They betrayed an air of superior intelligence, yet seemed to be pleading in a way, pleading to help and take it seriously, like a trapped soul. I had to get it out of my head. I took a deep breath and decided that the next best course of action would be to call an archaeologist, or at least an art curator. I decided to check my contact list. I couldn't find an archaeologist, but I did miraculously find an art curator, a former friend of mine at university. I called her and asked her to come to my house immediately. She lived about 2 hours away. I promised her I'd make it worth her time. She told me she'd arrive the next day, it already being late. I decided to take dinner and fall asleep. I woke up to a pecking and cawing in the middle of the night. It appeared Mr. Crow had come to remind me to take this seriously. Well, that's exactly what I was doing, though for my sake, not for its. Yet, it didn't try to enter the house or hurt me or anything. This event seemed to give me purpose in life. The endless days of drinking alone at home, sleeping during the day, drinking again, not to mention the numerous suicide attempts, had taken a toll on my body. I lived to die. I had no one, no lovers, no family, scarce few friends. The next day at about 11, I could hear the honk of Stephanie's car. She was wearing a designer dress and bag, and here I was in my sweatpants. I took her to the kitchen. I think she was expecting to see art or valuable artifacts, not a horrific old statue. She gasped and almost fainted at the stream of blood in the sink. I put her on the couch and asked her to take a deep breath. I plucked some chamomile and crushed them. I find that the smell of chamomile calms me down, and it seemed to allay some of her fears. I asked her if she had a solution to my problem. Still in shock, she replied with a hushed voice, "No." She promised not to tell a soul and promptly left, not even asking for the fee. I guess regular people are afraid of blood to an extent, and it appears that the alcohol numbs my nerves as well. The only remaining answer was to take the blood to a forensic analyst, hoping that it was human and that they could recognize the DNA. I called one of my acquaintances from the Army, who now works as an analyst. He asked me to meet him at 4 in the evening. I said that sounded fine. The next week breezed by. That is, until the day I got the results. The blood was that of Miss Mizoom, who was found murdered at her home 2 years back. The killer was never found. I had to bribe my friend to keep his mouth shut so I didn't end up in a police interrogation room. I assessed the public records relating to her case. Her body was found in a state of advanced decomposition, despite being killed only a day prior. She had acid burns and bite marks all over her body. Her house, and especially the attic, was completely trashed. I took a cursory review of her family history. Her elder sister was found dead in her room 2 years later, 4 months back. She'd committed suicide by slashing her wrist. What's more, she was found with the statue in her room. Though, why was the younger sister's blood flowing from the statue when the older was found with it? It seemed that the deaths were connected somehow. The older sister's death seemed natural as suicide could be, and that's why I'm in front of her uncle's house, uninvited, like a burglar. I'm glad he didn't just shoot me on sight. Her uncle was an old man in his 60s. He didn't seem too happy, but he politely invited me in. He gestured for me to have a seat on the sofa and got me a cup of matcha. I introduced myself as an art curator who came into possession of a bronze statue. He almost spat at me in disgust. "So you make your living selling dead people's artifacts?" I shrunk back, but calmly, as I replied, "No, I came into possession of it through an agent. I didn't know it belonged to a deceased person till today." I continued, "I wanted to pay my respects. I was sorry for your loss." He seemed a bit more pleased and replied, "Her grave is in the Shinto shrine." I nodded my head in acceptance. I asked, "If it's okay to share, may I know why she did such a thing?" He was taken aback. He replied, "Thank you for your concern. Not even her own family demonstrated that. Kiyomori was quite attached to her younger sister. Actually, now that I think about it, she probably had an unhealthy obsession with her sister. She paid for her college tuition, funded her hobbies, advised her, and followed her everywhere, if possible, despite being a responsible adult. The only obsession she had other than her sister was the statue you talked about. The statue was that of my aunt, Kia, Mori's grandmother. She chose to end her life the same way, just like Kiyomori did." Why did she commit suicide?" I asked. "You're obviously a curious person. I'll humor you. My aunt was forcibly married to a corrupt administrator. When she threatened to demask him, he turned public opinion against her and managed to get her arrested for adultery. She was sentenced to be hanged, but cut herself a day before. Her only choice was the noose or the blade. The statue was a commemoration of her honesty." I thanked him and walked to the front door, absent-minded, trying to fit the pieces of the puzzle together. As I walked out, I sensed a tingling on the back of my spine. I turned my back to see a pair of glowing yellow eyes staring back at me. It suddenly skittered away, with its body not to be seen. I'm not proud of what I did next. I ran through the street as fast as I could and reached home in record time. I opened a can of beer and turned on the TV. I doubted the soundness of my mind, and I thought my eyes were maybe playing tricks on me. Yet it had to be true. After all, I was sober back then, and my eyesight did save me back in Afghanistan. Also, in no way am I going to get killed like another horror movie protagonist. I don't think I'll knock on doors or investigate directly. I loaded my concealed Remington and disabled the safety. I'm going to sleep with it every day. I died in 1941, shortly after my daddy went off to war. I was just 15 and already sick when he was drafted. I think Mama knew I wasn't going to make it, and she begged Daddy to find a way out of the draft. I don't know if he tried or not, only that he left, and then I died a few weeks later. Mama took it hard. I watched her fall apart from behind the walls of our house. It was, at one point, a nice house. Then the letter came, saying that Daddy was killed by a Nazi's bullet. Mama couldn't take that at all. My Aunt Charlotte took Mama in to live with her, which probably saved her life. Sadly, I've lost touch with Mama since then. I suppose odds are pretty high that she's dead too by now. I think all the heartbreak around Daddy and me dying trapped my soul in this old house. And since Mama never sold it, I doubt she could have borne to. No one ever moved in. If she's dead, she apparently didn't will the house to anybody. It's still abandoned by all but me. It's a little ways out of town, trees and bushes that were just saplings when I was breathing are big, wild things now. They've never been pruned, not once. I can't go outside the house to have a look, but I bet it isn't even visible from the road. I'd guess the bank owns this place now, and they've just decided to let it rot. You know what, though? I'm glad. Because being in an old abandoned house is the only way I get to have any fun. How? The teenagers, friend. Teenagers started sneaking in here on dares back in the early 90s, right as the paint was beginning to peel. First, they threw rocks through all the windows. I didn't appreciate that, although I could see the fun in it. I haven't aged a day since I died, so I'm still a 15-year-old spirit. The very first pair who actually snuck in here were a couple of guys just older than me who were dared by their giddy girlfriends. As they crept around, these guys were whispering about whether or not the house was haunted. So I slammed the door and sent them running and screaming. Over time, I gave this place a reputation as a bona fide haunted house. Round October, each year, kids come from other towns even to experience my knocking and slamming. They all thought they could handle it, but I sent every one of them scurrying off. Something changed in the early 2000s. The teens started seeming less afraid of me, more curious. I couldn't scare them off as easily, which was fine since I enjoyed having them around. But they also started trying to talk to me. They bring in tape recorders and cameras to try to capture the stuff I do. I was always careful not to make anything move on camera, though. I liked how everyone else just had to take the kids I scared at their word. Providing proof of myself would have ruined the mystique. Some of the teenagers brought weird energy into the house. It was like having somebody track mud across the clean floor. Except instead of mud, it was anger, depression, jealousy, all sorts of ugly things. One thing you learn when you're dead is emotions are very tangible. They have a charge like a magnet or a battery. The right charge gives me energy, makes the house sort of hum. Some of the teens call it the house's aura or vibe. But if you bring the wrong charge in here, something too negative, messes everything up. I feel tired. The house feels older, and sometimes I can sense things moving outside. I don't mean outside like in the yard. I mean outside my spiritual periphery. See, ghosts like me are not the only type of spirit. There's some really dark stuff out there. Those dark spirits, well, they're attracted to negative energy. I sense them lurking, feel them sniffing out the anger and jealousy and sadness in here. Sometimes I wonder if I'm the only thing keeping them out of this space. I am, in spite of everything, a pretty positive guy. There's one object which I will never ever allow into this house again. Whenever I see one, I immediately do something really scary, like make footsteps right behind the teenagers or brush at their hair. I do whatever I can to get them out of here. The object in question is something called a Ouija board. I hadn't never seen or heard of such a thing until the day I almost watched some poor kid lose his soul, and might have almost lost my house to an evil spirit. That, friend, after all of this existence, is a story I would like to tell you today. They came in a foursome: Gavin, Lily, Emma, and Roland. Gavin and Lily were the ghost enthusiasts. They came in with all the presuppositions one would expect from a couple of kids who think they know everything about a subject in which nothing is really known to the living. Emma didn't seem nearly as enthusiastic about the visit, even though she was the real empath in the group. That'll come in real handy for me later. You'll see. Now Roland made me uneasy. See, styles and fashion have changed so much since my time that I have difficulty reading people based on their appearance anymore. For example, 30 years ago, if someone crept in here at night wearing a pair of tattered jeans, I'd have assumed they were a junkie that needed to be chased out before they got too comfortable in my house. Nowadays, everybody's wearing jeans that look ready to fall apart. They're all the rage, as I've heard being hip called at one time or another. All this to say, I have to judge people by stuff that's intangible to the physical world, but potent to me. These things are like someone's mental balance or spiritual harmony. The closest thing I can compare these things to are smell, but you don't get them through your nose. You just kind of pick it up, much like when you drive by a hog farm and before you realize it, you're aware you're breathing in pig stink. Roland's pig stink comprised of grief, insecurity, and anger, disdain for the world and everything in it. I'm not a psychic, but I assumed right away that Roland had lost someone very close, probably recently. Roland had the spiritual posture of someone who's been personally insulted by death. The foursome crept around for a while, and I let him be. I wanted to feel him out. Between Emma's empathic abilities and whatever was going on with Roland, I guess I was sort of nervous about this bunch. Eventually they went upstairs and ended up in my room, of all places, the very room in which I died back in 41. That's when Lily pulled out the Ouija board, and I studied it while they all got comfortable, but I didn't really understand how it worked. Not until Gavin put this little triangle on the board that he called a planchette. Seeing the hole in the middle of the planchette, I understood how the letters on the board were laid out for spelling. The corners designated for yes or no. I found it a little strange that the board had a space for goodbye, but not one for hello. Anyway, I've become a master of suspense over the years, so I let the group play for a few minutes without a response. You know, what finally made me move the thing was that I wasn't sure I could. I wanted to find out. Started by just sliding it a tiny bit, not spelling anything or questioning and asking them anything. Boy, did that get my new friends excited. "Are you doing that?" Lily asked Emma, then Roland. Both shook their heads. Lily and Gavin shared a look. Then, all theatrically, she asked, "What's your name, spirit?" I could have spelled out something like Beelzebub or even Satan, but you have to build up to those sorts of things. Instead, I gave them my real name, B.O.B., Bob. I always went by Robert in life, but, well, Bob spells quicker. "Hi, Bob," Gavin said, after the group simmered down. "We've come here respectfully to try to get your story. We want to know about who you were and if you'll tell us what the afterlife is like." Well, Gavin, it's pretty fun because I get to mess with people like you, I thought, as I slid the planchette straight to no. I was trying to put myself in mind of a dark spirit, and I imagined such a thing would be pretty standoffish. Oh, okay, Lily said. Is there anything you do want to tell us? Can you ask it about, Roland said. Well, we'll get there, don't worry, Gavin put in. I made him wait a few more seconds, then I slid the planchette around to spell not safe. Oh, spooky, right? I told you I was good at this. I'd never used an Ouija board before, but same rules applied. Take it slow, keep it vague, give them lots of time to speculate and doubt themselves. Not safe? Gavin asked, but more to the group than to me. Roland squirmed like he couldn't get comfortable, or like he knew something he wasn't sharing. His pig stink bloomed around him, billowing out of the top of his head like a smokestack. I didn't like it. Guys, can I be honest? Emma asked. I've actually been feeling a little unsafe, like something's off here. Maybe we should listen to what the board's saying. Oh, Emma, no, don't spoil the fun. I guess she was picking up on her friend Roland's negative energy, but she was attributing it to me, attempting to come across like someone warning the group of danger, rather than threatening the danger myself. So I moved the planchette around to spell trapped. As the group clamored about what that might mean, I decided to shake Gavin and Lily's confidence. I hovered over them both, plucked one hair from each of their heads. This took an immense amount of energy from me, but it was worth it. Both folded neatly in half on the floor. Then I dropped both their hairs onto the Ouija board. Pandemonium ensued. Gavin jumped to his feet. Lily slid back, elbows tripping. The other two stayed put, but sat up, stiff as corpses. All four were shouting and cursing and swearing. Do you want to hurt us? Emma asked, and dang it, I would have slid it to yes when they all touched the planchette again, if anyone else had asked, but I couldn't do that to poor Emma. I liked her. She seemed sweet, and the fact that she had a connection with the spirit realm, well, reminded me of how it felt to have my crush assigned as my lab partner in high school. It didn't mean anything was gonna happen between us, obviously. That would be ludicrous given my terminal case of death, but it made it feel more possible, I suppose. Like I said, I'm still 15. I slid the planchette to no. Can I ask something? That was Roland. Gavin gestured at him to go ahead after he sat back down. Have you been following me? Before I could answer, I felt myself pushed backwards by a soft but unmistakably powerful presence. The room's weight suddenly doubled. I'd never felt anything like this before. I'll never know what the living teens felt, but they all removed their hands from the planchette and leaned away from the board at the same moment. I stretched forward to move the planchette, realizing only later how that might have been the scariest thing I did that night. They all sat transfixed as I pushed the planchette around to spell careful. I wasn't trying to scare them, but I did worry a healthy dose of fear might be appropriate. I sensed movement from Roland's direction. He was looking down, staring at his own chest. Emma watched him closely. I believe she sensed what I saw. A shadow copy of Roland stood, rising from his body. At full height, he protruded from the boy's shoulders and neck. It stood well over 6 feet. It looked directly at me, held my gaze as it metamorphosed. Besides bearing Roland's general shape, it looked nothing like him. It was absolutely inhuman, with cheeks so thin and sunken I could see its jagged teeth outlined beneath the leathery skin. The eyes, which held me were sunken far into the skull and as small as BBs, but they glowed brighter than anything else. The thing's smoky claws now commanded the planchette. Remember, Roland had asked the board if he was being followed. I was going to answer no before I was forced away by the new dark spirit. The dark spirit dragged the planchette towards yes, causing an anxious stir amongst the teenagers. It spelled safe now. The dark spirit's paper-thin lips parted slightly, and I could see pointed teeth as black as the rest of it. "Okay, that's good," Lily said. It says it's been following you, but that you're safe now, so that must mean it's like protecting you." "Yeah, that's definitely a good thing," Gavin agreed. "No, Gavin. No, Lily. It's not a good thing," I screamed at them, but of course they couldn't hear me. Emma glanced my way, though. The planchette started moving again, guided by the smoky claw of the figure protruding from Roland's back. It spelled Roland's name. Emma gripped his arm as if to anchor him. Then the dark spirit spelled out the cruelest, most obscene lie yet. "It's Mom." Again, the terrible figure sneered at me. I was now convinced that it was a demon. Emma's grip morphed into a sideways hug as she pulled poor Roland towards herself. He started crying. The other two exchanged nervous whispers, too quietly for even me to hear. The planchette began to move again, but I summoned every kilowatt of energy I could to reach through the pressure force field and stop it. The demon growled at me, and with a too long arm, it swept me away. I spun backward like an astronaut through space. Emma sensed all of this. Still hugging Roland, she looked just above his head, exactly where the glowing demon protruded. "Mom, why did you do it?" Roland asked, voice choked by heartbreak. How could you just leave us like that?" This was real bad. I apologize for delaying what happened next, but you need to understand some things about death. See, there are different kinds of death. Mine was natural, but premature by natural standards. That sort of discrepancy, when combined with my mother's intense grief, created the environment which trapped me here. A death by human hands, be it murder or suicide, tears a hole through the separation between the living and the dead, like a bullet punched through paper. The holes take a long time to heal, if it ever does, and while it's open, just about anything can pass through. All this to say, the demon which had infested Roland had probably crawled through the hole left by his mother and attached itself to him. I bet it offered comfort at first, but judging by Roland's demeanor, even before the Ouija board session, it had already started getting mean. Classic demon trickery. If it could convince Roland to welcome it by pretending to be his mother's ghost, there's no telling how far it could take the possession. It might even kill Roland and harvest his soul. So when we left off, Roland, believing he was talking to his mother, had just asked how she could leave him. The demon began to answer, but I focused on getting the teens to safety. If I couldn't save Roland, then I wanted to at least try to protect the others. I'll admit, in the back of my mind, I was wondering what would happen if that demon fully manifested in my house. It had already demonstrated immense power over me, and that frightened me, for my own safety too. In the corporeal world, demons enter people. They dwell inside them and control them. Demons don't have that sort of use for us. Instead of possessing, they envelop and dominate us. They show us how little power and control we really have. I circumvented the group until I was behind Emma. That also put me right next to the demon, but it was occupied with the planchette, or maybe it didn't see me as a threat. Emma was the key. Her Empathetic ability was the only tool I had left, but I wasn't sure how to use it. She'd shown that she could hear me, but could she understand? I didn't think so. I wondered if she might sense my touch. Keeping an eye on the demon, I took hold of Emma's free wrist, the one that wasn't on Roland's shoulder. She immediately flinched away. I understood why, but that didn't make it any less frustrating. I tried again, this time only touching the back of her hand, and I projected my desire to save her and her friends. I even whispered to her, "I'm here to protect you." At least one of these tactics worked, and Emma allowed my hand to stay. I slid my thumb behind hers so I could gently guide her hand to the Ouija board. "No, Emma, leave it alone," Gavin said. "God, that idiot. Purporting to be so keen on the spirit world, yet being so dully insensitive to it." I could have punched him. I gave Emma a reassuring squeeze, which she emphatically understood. I guided Emma's hand towards the word goodbye at the bottom of the board and gave her another squeeze, then let her go. I felt confident that she would know what to do. "Guys, I think we need to end this," she said, her hand hovering over goodbye. "No!" Roland shouted, a deep anger boiling beneath his voice. "It's not his mother," I whispered to Emma, and thank the Lord she could understand me. Enough to matter, at least. Emma now pleaded with Gavin and Lily. "We need to end this session right now, guys. Something's really wrong. I can feel it." "I need to talk to her," Roland argued. "Roland, I don't think your mom is talking. I think it's something bad," Emma said, turning to him. "Yeah, she might be right," Lily said. "Before it said it was your mom, it was telling us we weren't safe and all that, remember?" Words can't describe how grateful I was to hear my silly prank may have saved the day. "Oh, yeah, spirits do lie to get what they want sometimes," Gavin said. "I can feel her, though," Roland whispered, but he sounded unsure. Emma's hand went to the planchette. Again, the demon's shadows clawed. I noticed her hand was outlined by a faint white aura. Whatever energy gave Emma her emphatic ability was something wholesome and beautiful. It forced the demon to retract angrily, almost like it had been burned. Gavin touched the planchette again, then Lily. They all looked at Roland, but he didn't move. Emma took his hand in her free one and pulled it towards the planchette. He still clearly did not want to end the session, but he allowed this to happen. They all four of them were touching the planchette. Emma slid it to goodbye, and, as if it had never been there, the demon vanished. I whispered thanks to Emma, but closing the session had dulled her connection to me. I'll admit this made me a little sad, despite the victory we had won. The teenagers left shortly after, and I haven't seen them since. That must have been, 10 years ago now. It's hard to keep track. Roland didn't seem any lighter when he left that night. Unfortunately, I have to assume that he still had the attachment. But with a friend like Emma by his side, I hope he's been able to rid himself of it. Can't imagine she would have let him go on like that. The white light I saw around her hand made it easy to believe she saved him. And, like I already mentioned, Ouija boards aren't allowed in my house anymore. These days, kids are using all kinds of electronic equipment, though, and the Ouija board seems to be getting less popular. That's good. You just can never know what's really talking to you with one of those things. It could be a swell guy like me, or could be something much, much darker. It's best just to keep those channels closed. You can't ever really know who or what is speaking to you from the other side.